good morning?
Good morning.
Oh, you can do better than that. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Dorsey Atkinson. I'm the pastor here at Life Spring Church, and I am so glad that you took out of your time to be with us today. In case you didn't hear the announcement earlier, this will be the last time that we're having one service at Life Spring. We are going to 2 services next week. Got about some, yeah. For some of you, that's really not going to change because you're just going to keep coming at the same time. But for some of you, you're going to be that group of people that's going to help us by coming to 2 services for a while, inviting friends and neighbors to come and be a part of that, and volunteering to help those 2 services happen. So we're just so excited. And I'm just thankful for all those of you that are going to try that over the next 60 days and figure out which one of those services work best. But it allows more people to be able to have an opportunity to come and be a part. If you did not fill out your connection card, you need to make sure you fill those out, and especially circle the parts about what part of the stage of relationships that you're in. If you're single, dating, married. At the end of this service, we're going to have a drawing, and I'll let you know about that in a little bit, but it's a pretty cool drawing, a pretty cool gift that you're going to be getting, whoever gets their name drawn. Speaking of gifts, how do you like my new shirt? Do you like my new shirt? Are you liking that? Am I sport? I'm rocking it now, I'm telling you. This shirt was given to me by a friend of mine, Emmanuel. He's here today. Emmanuel is from Ghana, and his mom passed away a couple of months ago. And because of your generosity through the church, we were able to help him get his plane ticket back and be able to get back over there to be with his family in the untimely passing of his mother. And we're continuing to surround him with love. And Emmanuel, we love you, and we're going to continue to be with you through this process. And just thank you. But Emmanuel, when he came back after spending time with his family, and he's in the doctorate program over there in public. What's your major? Public health. So he's working on his public health doctorate to be able to go back to his country and help out over there. And so he brought me back a gift, and he brought me back this shirt. Now, see, this is right. This is just me. See, I wouldn't have known this was me. Now, I don't know about you, but how do you know about that perfect gift? Have you ever really thought you wanted something that it was just so, you're like, man, I just got to have that. Years ago, I was at another church, and I was surrounded by a bunch of people in that church that were cooks. They were bakers. You know, they were all these women in that church that loved to cook, and they could do it. They could bake cakes and pies and all kinds of things. And I got to being around them so much. They all talked about these, you know, they were having a bake sale one time, and Jody and I said, well, we'll go to the store and get some cake mix and mix a cake, and we'll bring it and bake a cake and bring it. They said, oh, no, preacher, we're not going to do any of those box cakes things. We do cakes from scratch here. And I'm like, there's such a thing as cake from scratch? I didn't know. I mean, for us, it was Duncan Hines. That was scratch to me, you know. So, but anyway, so they were making, they were talking about the mixers that they had, and they had this thing called a KitchenAid 10-speed mixer. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? If you're familiar with what a KitchenAid, so some of you know, this is not your average run-of-the-mill thing. This is a high-class, high-dollar thing. You can turn around, you can put attachments on. I think you can grind sausage with it. You can make bread. I don't know what. I just had to have one of these because I knew that's what was going to make me like these other people. If I had this KitchenAid, this 10-speed KitchenAid mixer, I'm telling you that the lid thing flips up. You know what I'm talking about. It's got the little stainless steel bowl, man, and it's awesome. And so I started dropping hints. You know what I'm saying? I'm dropping hints because I'm like, coming close to Christmas, man, what do you think you might want, Dorsey? And I'm like, Jody, I might want that 10-speed KitchenAid mixer. She's like, you don't cook. I'm like, no, but you don't understand. I'm going to cook. I just got to have one of those, and I wanted it so bad. And every time I was around somebody, I'm like, I'm just dropping the hints. Well, I got my 10-speed KitchenAid mixer for Christmas that year. I was like, yes. So I started baking cakes. And that first couple of months, I probably baked 15, maybe 20, because the first 5 really weren't that good. But I baked 20 cakes. And it was awesome. I was having a great time doing that. And then I got sort of out of that. You understand what I'm saying? And the next year, I maybe baked 2. And the next year, none. But I got a 10-speed KitchenAid mixer. In fact, that KitchenAid mixer is up in our closet. I was going to bring it out today to show you that 10-speed KitchenAid mixer, but it had so much dust on it, I really didn't think I needed to do that. But let me tell you about another gift I got. Years ago, Jody and I was working. This is when I was in college, so it's like dinosaur day, you understand? And so when we were passing through the dinosaur place and all, and we were going, I was working for this guy, and at Christmas that year, they gave us a gift. And they gave us a gift, gave Jody and I both, what we term moon boots. Now, I don't know what they are, but they're like little bedroom slippers that aren't really bedroom slippers. We call them moon boots in our house. Our whole family knows what these are. And what you basically do is you wear these and they keep your feet warm and they you can go outside and all this. And I'm thinking, who gives somebody moon boots or these type of things as a Christmas gift? And I thought, why did they give me something I could use? I'm in college, Jody and I are married and we're in college. You could have gave me something, even a gift card, and I could have bought what I wanted. It's like, and they didn't give me a receipt so I could return it. You understand what I'm saying? So it's like, but let me tell you something. 30 years later, I still have these. And I still wear them. And they can be washed. I just want you to know that they wash. But my point to you is sometimes the gift that we think that we want the most and we desire the most is the very gift that we end up sitting up on the closet shelf and not even using. And the gift that we think we want the least turns out to be the gift that we can't live without, that we've got to use. You see, truth is, most of the time, you and I very seldom, we have just a very little concept of what it is that we truly need in our lives. You see, what we think we need in our lives is influenced by a whole lot of things. It's influenced by the TV. TV and advertisements, they tell us what we need. They tell us that we need these things and the brand new and the new improved and all these things, and it will make your life better. You will be so much better if you have this. They have things it's about your culture of where you are. In the culture of that church where I was at, that 10-speed mixer was going to make my life. It was going to be a great gift. And I was affected by those influences. Sometimes it's the friends that you have or the company that you keep. Sometimes it's the culture you was brought up. Sometimes it's where you were brought up in your family or what your family beliefs are, and even your friends and everything else in the community you're in. What we're talking about in the last of this message series is singleness. And for some people, singleness, if I say the phrase, I'm like, singleness is a gift. But for some people, they would go, that's a dang gift I want to exchange. I want to take that to the department. Give me the receipt for that part of life. Because what has happened is, in our culture, in our world, we have skewed the idea of why singleness is important. And we sort of look at single people, especially as they get older. When you're single and you're 16, that's a good thing, okay? And I tell my daughter, when you're 19 and 20, it's still a good thing. You don't have to be pressing on this. But when you get in your mid-20s, and then into your later 20s, and then into your 30s, and then into your mid-30s, even into your 40s, and you're still single, people start looking at you funny. Is this a true statement? Now, the only people that said yes were the people who are being looked at funny. Because the other of us are going, oh, we would never do that. We treat you the same. Who, us? Let me tell you. I want to speak on behalf of the singles to the rest of the world right now and to the rest of the people in this world. Marriage is not the goal. Marriage is not the goal. The goal is to do what God calls us to do. But we think, let me give you a couple examples. They just popping in my head, and you're just going to have to hang with me because when stuff pops in my head, it's got to come out, or I don't know, it's just, I could explode up here, okay? So how many of you ever heard a married person come up to a single and say something like this? You just don't know how lucky you are to be single. You can do anything you want to do. You can go everywhere. You just don't know. And I'm thinking, if you're single, you want to say, then why the heck did you get married? If you wanted to be single, then stay your butt single. Don't get married. Is this a true analogy? What's wrong with you? You just too picky. You can't get a date because you too picky. You better than anybody else. You don't want to date anybody else. Lower the standards and you'll get some. I'll get some. No, excuse me. Hi, welcome to LifeSpring. We're glad you joined us at this point in our service. Do not ignore everything that's happened before this. Maybe I need to start keeping things inside of my head more. I don't know. My point is to this. We have created a culture where we are putting too much pressure on being single, especially being single as a Christian. Things come up to, and it's hurtful things. Are you gay? Are you straight? Are you this? And there's all kinds of craziness that comes up because somebody's choosing to be single. Or that singleness has chose them. Meaning that someone may have been married and a spouse dies and now they're single. Do you understand? And they would have loved to have continued to be married, but they're not. They're single. And our culture presses on us and pushes us. And see, I'm going to say this to, here this is to married people or people who are in couples or dating. Quit excluding, inviting single people to things because you're trying to figure out what they want to go to and what they don't want to. Let them decide. If you have a party and they're your friends and you want to invite them, don't say, ooh, they don't have somebody to go with. And they're going to feel awkward. They know what the deal is. You don't need to be making decisions for them. In fact, we who are couples, we who are married, need to be encouraging them to live out the life that God has called them to. Because if we don't, we're going to create the pressures and the influences on them that's going to cause them to yield and to try to blend everything else in with their life that really doesn't need to be blended. Now, this situation occurred back in the biblical days. And there's a particular story I want to talk to you about. Now, I'm going to talk to you about a guy named Paul. And Paul was one of the first missionaries to go out and begin the churches. And Paul went out and he went, like they call it a missionary journey, but he just would go out and he would go from this place to this place. He would preach or talk about Jesus. And people would go, man, I like that. I like that. I want to know more about this Jesus you're talking about that cares for me, that loves me, even though I'm different than everybody else, or even though I feel like I'm beating up, it brings me hope. And they'd say, well, why don't 4 or 5 of you get together and just start you a church? And they began little groups and little meetings, and they would talk, and they began a church. And Paul would stay there for a couple days, or a couple weeks, or a couple months, or even a year, get several churches going, and then he would travel on to another place. And so after he had been to this place called Corinth. Now Corinth was a rough place. Corinth was this huge metropolis, had about 600,000 people there. I'm talking about it's huge. 600,000 people gathered in one place there. And I'm just saying, without indoor plumbing. This is a major metropolis at this time. Cultures were passing through there. It was a key part in Greece where people would come through and do trade. So all of these cultures and things were blending together. Different beliefs, different thoughts on marriage or any type of cultural things or what's right, what's wrong, and it began to bleed in. And in the middle of this were these few church people. These few followers of Jesus. And they're trying to hold to these teachings that Paul had taught them before he went on his next journey. And so what was happening was, in order to ease the pressure, they began to try to blend all these things in to their church. And they were blending all kinds of things in there. They were blending things in there about whether you should have a lawsuit against somebody if you're in church. 2 church members shouldn't have a lawsuit together. There was a whole lot of stuff about sex. Now, if you want to, I'll tell you what book it is in a minute, but I got to shut up about sex because I'm thinking about where. See, you're messing with me. They were having issues about sex. Think about this. See, in that culture, in that place, they had this temple to this goddess called Aphrodite. And at that temple, that was a love god or some type of goddess or something like that, one of these Greek gods. They felt, well, hey, it's better to have sex with a prostitute who is employed by the church than it is for you to go out and just mess about with anybody. And so they had what they called shrine prostitutes. Now some of the guys are going, let me think about that a minute. And so they were doing these things. They were all kinds of just bad stuff happening. All kinds of things. Sex outside of marriage, same sex, sex with adults and little bitty kids, and that was okay. Because in those cultures, in that environment, they brought all that in there. So in our country, in our world, we do this, and they brought it in, we'll try it. We don't want to be different than anybody else. And they started bringing this into church. In fact, one guy ended up having sex with his mother-in-law. With his, I guess it's his mother-in-law would be who's his sister? No, his brother. His wife's mama. And it was okay because the other guy was still alive. And that was okay because you could do that. And it got to be, well, what do we do, Paul? So some of this word got to Paul, he's traveling over, and he was in Galatia at this time. And so they sent him a note, or some messengers come, and a letter come to him. And we can't find that letter. That hadn't been able to be found. But you can tell by what Paul wrote back to them what they were asking. They was asking a whole bunch of questions. What do we do about this stuff? They'd ask him, what do we do about divisions, quarrels? What do we do about lawsuits among believers? What do we do about sexual immorality? What do we do about this freedom in Christ? What's the order in worship that we should be doing? How should the Last Supper or the Lord's Supper be done? And how do we use these gifts that you were talking about, these spiritual gifts? And what about marriage and singles? What about that? Should we be married? Should we be single? Can we keep playing the field? What do we need to do? And so Paul writes them a letter back. And during that letter that he wrote to them is recorded in the Bible, and it's called 1 Corinthians. It was the first letter that he sent them. And later on, before he got there, some other information came to him after he sent them the first letter. He needed to send them some more before he got there, and he sent them 2 Corinthians, the second letter to him. And so when Paul was going through this, he took the time to explain what marriage is. Took the time to explain what it would be like. Think about this. We don't have slaves here, but in that culture they had slaves, and slaves began to be followers of Christ. Well, what do? Do they stay slaves? Do you turn them loose? How do you do that? Do you forgive their debts if they chose to go into slavery and they said, I'll sell myself into slavery because I owe so much money? Do you forgive them? They had all these issues. So Paul was addressing these. He was addressing the sexual immorality. He was addressing everything. But in the middle of this, Paul would tell them, I don't want you to run away and leave. He was saying, you need to be Christ's light in the middle of this darkness. You need to hold firm. And understand that God's going to use you and your faith to transform the world rather than the world transforming you back to who you used to be. And I think that's the same thing that Paul tells us. If you have been given the gift of singleness, or you've been given the gift of marriage, understand that those are gifts, and God knows those gifts best for you. And because the world is pressuring you to do other things, you don't have to do those things. So I want to pull it to you, and I'll back this up. I want to read a couple of verses out of this. In 1 Corinthians 7:17, or 1 Corinthians 7:7, he says, I wish that you were all as I am. Now, Paul was single. And he's telling them, I wish all of you were like me and you were single. But you're not, because some of you are married and some of you aren't. And he says this, but each of you has your own gift from God. One has this gift, and one has another. Inferring that some of you have the gift of singleness, and some of you have the gift of marriage. Some of you were married when you come to know Christ, and some of you were single when you come to know Christ. You don't have to, some of you were circumcised when you come to know Christ, and some of you weren't circumcised when you come to know Christ. You don't have to do these other things just because you've come to Christ. Those things don't make you a follower of Christ. He begins in this passage, and when he says this, he says, but each of you have your own gift. This is what I want you to know, and this is your first fill in the blank. The gift of singleness or marriage or relationship is it's a personal gift to you. It's personal. He says He gives it to each of you. A unique, special gift. That's your second fill in the blank. It's a unique gift. It's personal and designed for you, of who you are and where you are in your life. Now, I want you to understand, there are some people who are called to a life of singleness. Some people are called to a life of marriage. Some people are called to a period of singleness, and some to a period of marriage. Do you understand the difference? I don't know if I'm... The difference is a life of singleness means my entire life. But I could also be called to a period of singleness where it's only for a time period. Do you understand what I'm saying? I could be called to a life of marriage and both my wife and I die at the same time. Or I could be called to a period of marriage where through death or other instances that I'm not married. Do you understand? It was for a period. But in that moment, what he's saying is it's a personal gift to you. It's a unique gift. And it's a perfect gift because it's designed for you, for who you are. Remember, I was talking about this. I thought I needed the 10-speed KitchenAid mixer. That was what I wanted. That was the gift I was looking for. And now that gift that I longed for, that I let the world or the environment convince me that I needed, now sits on my shelf collecting dust. Some of you who are single at this time, in this stage, or maybe for your life, I don't know, are listening to the world and thinking you have to go to the world's way and say you got to be married. You don't need to do that unless God calls you to do that. It's okay to be single. See, I think when those people who say that phrase, oh, you just don't know how lucky you are to be single, remember how special that time was that you had when you're single. How special that was. And the third thing is, it's a gift from God, for goodness sakes. The God of all creation who knows you, who knows your heart, who knows your desires. And I can tell you with this with very confident or most certain. God knows everything. Past, present, and future. And He knows the things that are coming in your life that you don't know about. You think you know. You think you know what it's going to be like, but you don't. You're speculating. You're making educational guesses. God knows. He even did this with His own Son, Jesus. Think about this. Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist. Comes up out of the water. A voice from heaven says, "This is my Son, of whom I'm well pleased. Do what He says." I'm thinking Jesus is fixing to go out there. He's in his early 30s. He's going to go out and do ministry. He's going to kick tail, take names, and He's going to have it all taken care of. And do you know what the Holy Spirit did at that point? Guided Him out into the wilderness alone. Not for a life, but guided Him out there to be alone, to fast. And put Him in a place where there was nothing, no one, isolation. For most of us, we would run and go crazy. Jesus could have said, wait a minute, God, that's not the gift I'm looking for. I know better what I need. Heck, I was with you when you created all of creation. When you made everything, I was with you. Nothing was created that wasn't created with me without being in your presence. We both were there together. But Jesus yielded and went out in the desert. And during that time in that desert, during that time that you think it would be a rough time for Him, He ends up having the opportunity to grow in His understanding of God, to grow in His understanding of what it's like to be human, to grow in his understanding, to know what it's like to be dependent on God when there's nobody else that understands what you're called to do. See, some of you in this room, God has got a calling on you, and he knows what he wants you to do, but you don't know it, and you're still trying to grasp it. And you think, I got a little glimpse of it, and nobody understands, but God knows. And whatever stage you're in, there is nothing that you have done, are doing, or will doing that God's going to go, I never saw that happening. He knows. And because of that, many of the things that we go through are preparation. They're a personal, unique gift of God for us. So we shouldn't be rushing to try to exchange that gift and get something else that we like more. That the people say that we need, oh, you'll be more satisfied if you're married. You'll be more satisfied if you do this. We shouldn't be running toward those. Paul continued in 1 Corinthians 7:17. He says, nevertheless, each person should live as a believer in whatever situation the Lord has assigned them to, just as God has called them. This is the rule I lay down in all my church. So he's saying, this is what he's basically saying. Be content where you are. That's your fill in the blank. Be content where you are. Quit searching for everything else. If God has called you into a life of singleness, either for a life or for a period, be content. Now, let me tell you, there's a whole lot of reasons for discontent. There's a whole lot of reasons. Let me give you a couple. One, you're too focused on yourself. Too focused on yourself, meaning I know what I need. I know what's better for me, and it's all about me. So you overanalyze and you dissect every aspect of your life. You dissect your history, and then you focus on what you want. My heart is breaking, God. Do you not think God knows that? The problem is that when you focus on what you want all the time, and I'm going to tell married people, I'm talking to you too. You start focusing on what you want in a relationship, that's called selfishness. And when you're selfish, you have a blurred vision. You can't see all around. You lose your peripheral vision. You lose the ability to see past yourself. And when you can't see past yourself, then you can't really see where God's guiding you and what He's wanting to do with you. So one reason for discontentness is too focused on yourself. The next one is you're too focused on others. See, this begins to get us to be obsessed about what they have and what I don't. Well, they have a marriage and they have children and they have that, and you get so focused on that, then again, you're blinded to the fact of what God's calling you to. See, I can tell you this about being too focused on others. No matter how great you are, there's always going to be somebody else greater. No matter how pretty you are or handsome you are, there's always going to be somebody else more handsome or more pretty. No matter how rich you are, there's always going to be someone else that's more rich. And so if you start focusing on what everybody else has and you think that's what's going to satisfy you when God hasn't called you. Now again, I come back to, I'm talking to Christians, I'm talking to believers who go, God's going to guide me. God provided the Holy Spirit to guide me and direct me in the life that He wants me to go. He's not going to leave you hanging. He's not going to leave you hanging. See, both of these reasons for discontentment takes away the attention from God. It takes attention away from God and it puts it on yourself or others. And see, Paul saw this as a problem. Listen to what he says in the chapter prior to that, in the previous couple paragraphs before he said what we said there. He says, do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you have received from God? You're not your own. You were bought at a price. Therefore, honor God with your bodies. What he's saying is recognize. See, Christians, the thing that separates a Christian from a non-Christian, and one of the things, we just recognize we ain't in control. We just recognize that God did this for us. And we try to live like that. And what he's saying is just recognize this. Don't you remember? See, to a non-believer, this doesn't make any sense because they don't recognize this. They don't understand this. They hear us talk about this Jesus. They see us as that candle in a corrupt world, as just a little bit of light in a dark world, and they don't understand it. But for some reason, they're drawn to the light. They're drawn to the light to find out more. I want to know more. But they don't understand it. But to the one that is the light, we just understand, well, I know I'm supposed to shine. I don't know how it works. I'm just shining because of my belief. See, as followers of Jesus Christ, as Christians, He's reminding each of us, you were bought at a price. Christ died for your sins and for the sins of the world. And the difference for you as a Christian, you know that. You know that He died for you. You know that He cares for you and loves you. We know this. And therefore, we should live according to that. But see, the world's going to say, hey, a little bit of discontentment won't hurt you. Playing the field, having sex outside of marriage, that's not going to be a big deal. Don't worry about it. But it will. It destroys the plan that God has. Sexual immoralities, the things that are not biblical, those things that come up, oh, it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal if I do that. I just lowered the barrier. That's what my friends tell me, just lower the barrier. No one will ever find out what we do in the behind the scenes and what we do or how I feel or I do and live this one life here, but then I can keep that behind the scenes. And in our culture, in our world, I'm telling you, in our United States, this is the one. Everyone's doing it. Let me tell you something, if you're in college, that's bull. Everybody's not doing it. You just have a group of people trying to convince you to do that so that it will be done. They're trying to blow out your light. And for you in the married couples who are struggling with your marriage and you think you need to go outside your marriage to be able to get satisfied, or you should be able to look at pornography, or you should be able to do these other things, or self-gratify yourself, or whatever the things are, when you start getting into those situations there, you've lost sight of what God's calling you to do and to be. And then you say to yourself, no one else is struggling with this. But we are. Every one of us is struggling. Paul continues in verse 12. He says, I have the right to do anything, you say, but not everything is beneficial. I have the right to do anything, but I will not be mastered by anything. See, he's saying as Christians, you can do anything. You could go back to the way you used to be. You could live the life you used to do and do whatever. But he's like, is that really what you're wanting? Is that really what it's about? He says, basically, it's about self-control. I think I might have skipped contentment. Did I ever go over contentment? Need to be content? I did that. So I'm at self-control. I'm right. What he's saying is you need to be self-controlled. You can do anything, but you need to be self-controlled. Now, I'll tell you something about being self-controlled. Self-control is the resistant exercise that one has over their own impulses, emotions, or desires. Self-control is not something that you can achieve on your own simply by trying real hard. Paul tells in another church, he's writing them a letter to talk to them about troubles that they're having. He says this to the church in Galatia, and it's found in his letter to them called Galatians in the Bible. He said, but the fruit of the Spirit is this. It's love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness. All this makes sense. Doesn't that sound like something that God would give you as you live close to Him? He'd give you love. He'd give you kindness. He'd give you peace. He'd give you goodness. He'd give you faithfulness. Let me go. Gentleness and self-control. Self-control is a gift. Now you can sit there and go, I don't want that gift. I don't want to deal with that. Or you can accept the gift that God has given you. Let me tell you something about if self-control is a fruit. You just don't go up to a tree and put fruit on it and say, there's the fruit I want. The fruit grows from being attached to the branches and to the root. That fruit grows of self-control from being attached to Jesus Christ, the branch, and to God, the root. And that nourishment that comes from that root and comes from that branch comes out to that fruit. and it begins to grow, and it begins to ripen. See, self-control starts with your connection with God. And when you're worried about what others are saying, or you're worried about what you're wanting, and that connection breaks down. And when that connection breaks down, that fruit can't grow, and so then we lose all self-control. See, as you walk, as you grow in your walk with the Lord, self-control should become more evident in your life. If you're struggling with self-control, then I would say stop listening to what the world's telling you. Stop listening to your selfish self. And come back and say, I need to be getting back with God. I need to be there in prayer. I need to be there in Scriptures. I need to come back to who I was when I was born again as a Christian. I don't mean I know everything. Something has disconnected me from feeding this fruit of self-control, because you know what? I should be able to walk away from that situation. I should be able to say no. I shouldn't be blinded by what the world's saying. You see, the combination of self-control and contentment in our situations will allow us to enjoy the gift of singleness or the gift of marriage. And it'll be that gift that doesn't sit on a shelf, but that you use the rest of your life. And it gets wore down, and you just can't do without it. And you get on that cold night, and you're, where's my moon boots? I ain't looking for a KitchenAid mixer. It's the perfect gift. It's the unique gift. It's the gift that God has given you either for a lifetime or for a period. But embrace it. Embrace it. Be content where you are. And be self-controlled.